Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you're tuning in. Welcome to GDG Cape Town's Flutter Festival. I hope you enjoy with a cup of tea or drink wherever you are, and let us tell you more about Flutter in today's event. But before we get started, I would like to give us a bit of intro about who we are and what we do as GDG Cape Town. For regulars, you probably have heard this multiple times, but bear with us. I want to introduce new audience to this chapter, so we're just going to tell you more about ourselves. So we are a Google Developer Group chapter recognized by Google, and we do self-organized events supported by Google and local sponsors. And all speakers and organizers are volunteers, and we do this at our free time, and we just want to share the knowledge and good tech out there. And if you are interested in talking to us, sponsorships, speaking, do reach out to us. We have some of our co-organizers in the chat. Just ping them on. I'll introduce them just now. How to get in contact with us? We are on the gdgcommunity.dev /GDG Cape Town. You can ping us on Twitter at GDG Cape Town, or if you like email, you can reach us at gdgcapetown@gmail.com. For people who love Slack, we are on GDG Cape Town and the ZA Tech Slack work group, or you can ping one of the organizers who I'll introduce to you now. So we have a lovely team of 4 organizers that we do work together and do these things organize these events every month. So we have Maya Krotpas, Sylvia Dickman, Ahmed Dikiwa, and myself, George Mele. If you want to join us or interested in joining this committee, you can ping one of us. We'll gladly give you more information regarding that. And who are sponsors? These events will not be possible without the support of our sponsors. Thanks to Pitch Payments and Google that keep on helping us to allow us to make and set up these events. And we've got some good news for all people in Cape Town. We are going back to in-person meetups for the next month. So look out for the details in our communication channels on Twitter, ZD Tech, and we shall send you some more information when we have planned. So for today's agenda, we've got Sylvia Dickman taking us through state management with Flutter Block, and later on we'll be joined by Maureen Josephine, who's a GDE, who will be taking us through BBD with Flutter Gherkin. With much further ado, let me bring on Sylvia.
All right. Hello, George. How are you doing?
Hi, Sylvia. How are you doing? I'm good.
Very good. Very good. I hope the audio is good. I just realized a second ago there's the biggest fly of the world buzzing around my desk here. So if you hear a bit of static in the background, it's nature.
Probably the fly wants to join in the speech.
I think it's very appropriate.
All right, Sylvia, take it away.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight. My name is Sylvia Diekmann, and I will be talking a bit about state management, in particular about the block pattern in Flutter today. And I'll also report back from my experience with the Flutter puzzle challenge, which happened just last month. Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong window. All right. Perfect. Before I jump in, a few words about myself. As you already heard, I'm one of the organizers here. You probably also picked up from my accent. I'm not born in South Africa, but I do live in Stellenbosch for 8 or 9 years already, and more to come. In my day job, I'm a technical manager, although I currently don't work as such. I work mostly as a freelancer. And when I do app development, I mostly do it for fun, not so much in my day job. I'm not born a mobile developer. I started out in the backend initially and had a long journey through enterprise, through web technologies, and eventually for the last year or two, I have solidly settled on Flutter. Now, if you do think that my bio sounds like I'm all over the place, there's one combining theme in all of this. I really, really love studying new tech, and I spend a lot of time investigating new tech and talking about it. This is kind of why we're here today. All right, let's jump in. Let's talk about state management. So as it turns out, state management is nothing particular to Flutter. I mean, you find it in pretty much every web framework. It's the idea of that your UI is, your app has state, and the function of the state then turns into UI. The UI is a function of state. And again, all the normal app frameworks have this concept behind it. If you look at the official Flutter documentation, they have a long section on state management. And they currently, I counted them, list 14 different approaches, all side by side, all endorsed by Google and the Flutter team. And they actually start out that section, I kid you not, with state management is a complex topic. So we are in for some trouble here if even the Flutter team says that. But why is it so complex? Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we can look at a very simple example. As I said, there are many ways to deal with state management, and probably the easiest one is simply with a stateful widget. And if you ever did a Flutter 101, you probably came across this. You define a stateful widget, which then automatically creates a state object, state class matched with it. In the state class here, I have some payload. So in my case, I defined a very, very simple button, just a toggle button that has states on and off, is selected or not selected. That gets initialized, and eventually in my build method, I call another widget, and in the onChanged callback, I call another callback called setState, and in this setState method, I actually update my state whenever that is necessary. Now, the setState call is important because that's actually the trigger for the stateful widget to update itself, to rebuild itself. This works perfectly. There is nothing wrong with it. It gets you started quickly. However, you do realize if your app gets more and more complex, you have a lot of functionality within this one state class here and within this set state method. So if your business logic gets a little more complicated, like, I don't know, you switch to different colors depending on the state, eventually it becomes incredibly hard to maintain. So that's why stateful widget is good to get you started. And if your app is simple enough, maybe it brings you all the way. But chances are eventually you're looking for something else. And so this is where Flutter block comes in. Again, block is nothing particular to Flutter. It's a design pattern. I think it was first described in 2018, I believe, in at some conference. So it's a generally applicable design pattern, and it has been implemented in Flutter through the block and Flutter block packages, but has been implemented in other frameworks as well. The word block stands for business logic component, and the idea is that you create a very, very clear separation between the UI and the business logic. So you create an actual class for the business logic that is encapsulating the state. And then the UI communicates with the block and vice versa only through streams of events one way and streams of state changes the other way. So if the UI, if something happens, like let's say the user clicks on a button, the UI will issue an event which will be captured by the block, will be analyzed according to the business logic, and then whatever the business logic subscribes, eventually there'll be a state change. And the state change is in return observed by the UI and causes the UI to update. Same happens in the back end if there's a data change, for example, some new Firestore data coming in. Same thing, it gets negotiated with the block. The block eventually might or might not trigger a state change, and that can be observed by the UI. So this architecture allows for very, very clean separation of concerns, which is kind of the biggest advantage of this pattern. How might this work? Well, let's look again at a super trivial button example. Now, this is really trivial, but I mean, bear with me, that's the best I could fit on a slide. I'll start out with a simple state class here, and I only have one, and my payload is again just this Boolean value. Typically, state classes, most people define them as immutable and comparable. That makes it easier for the observer to detect when a state change happens. And in my case here, I have only one state change, but in a more complex example, you might have a lot more. Oops, sorry, wrong button. The matching event, again, I only have one, but there might be more. In my case, I just define a button pressed event with no extra payload, super trivial. And then these two come together in the block, in the button block. So here you see the event is part of it and the state is part of it. This block, the most important piece is a callback for each event. So in my case, I only have the button pressed event. So there's this callback that gets the new event. I can observe I can inspect the event, and based on my business logic, eventually there'll probably be a new state emitted. In my case, I emit this button state that has just a payload reversed to the value reversed to whatever it was. So this is pretty much all. Somewhere else in the code, in a completely different place, I would use this block now. I would most likely access it with a provider, through a provider, and I'll talk a little more on the next slide about what that is. And then, for example, when this button is actually pressed, the button widget might call the button block through the provider, add a new event button pressed, and then handle everything else and just wait for a state change to update itself. Now, this was the block component, the block package. There's also a matching Flutter block package, and that has a bunch of widgets which make integration much simpler. By the way, Qubit think of it as a simplified block. It's, for all intents and purposes, behaves very similar. So the widget that you most likely come across if you use this technique is the block provider. Or multi-block provider if you have several in one go. You might also have the repository provider. And then the other four are the consumers. And the differences are subtle. For example, the builder rebuilds every time the state that it depends on changes automatically. The listener rebuilds only one time, so that would be appropriate for events that shouldn't be happening more than once. And there are subtle differences between between the selector and the consumer as well. I won't go into detail here in when to use them. I think the documentation is really good there. And typically, once you have your use case, it all makes a lot of sense. But ultimately, have lines like this in your code. You have, for example, if you want to determine the current value of a button, you might set this observer and basically observe just the isSelected value of the state. It's actually a nice thing. So it serves a bit as a filter. If other aspects of the state update, this element would not rebuild, but if the isSelected value updates, whatever depends on this value will be rebuilt. And yeah, this is, I think, the way to emit a new event. We already talked about that. All right. So this is where I admit that I'm a little in trouble. I probably noticed that I was squirming a bit when I came to the example because it can get very complex very quickly, or seemingly. I've been aware of the block pattern for quite a while, and I repeatedly looked at it, worked through a few tutorials, and always ended up with like the tutorial was a lot longer than I expected. There's a lot of boilerplate to create. You know, you have to create a state class, preferably a state directory. Some people have an event directory. It gets rather messy rather quickly. And at the end of a tutorial, you have like a button or a glorified hello world, really. So until now, I was not impressed really, and what I basically came away with is that Block is probably cool, but just not worth it for the type of apps I'm writing. Relatively small, relatively prototypical. So this is my old life. In my new life, everything changed, and it changed when I did the Flutter Puzzle Challenge. So to tell you a little bit what that is about, the Flutter team issued a challenge in January, and I think it's the second time they did this. They gave developers 6 weeks to implement a game in a competition. And the rules were fairly laid back. You know, everything goes, it has to run on Flutter, and it has to be a slider puzzle. But, you know, however you interpret that, you know, is up to you. Now, what they did is they helped us along a little bit. They published an example, and that example was written by a consulting company called Very Good Ventures. If you are in the Flutter space, you might have heard about them. They do lots of work, publish lots of popular packages. And among many things, the original author of the block package also works for them. So not surprisingly, their code contains blocks all over and is in generally really, really well written. I tremendously enjoyed studying their code, and I found the way they structured it very easy to understand and also really, really easy to extend for my purpose. So, and what I realized is as I studied this example that uses blocks in a more complex context than any tutorial can ever do, it started to make sense. And I found that through extending their code, through basically interacting with the blocks they defined already and defining my own on top of it, it was easily possible for me to write my own puzzle version kind of as an extension. So in the end, I published my competition submission is the Einmal eins puzzle. The name is a bit of a word game. Einmal eins in German literally means 1 by 1. And it's what German kids would call timetables. So a German kid would say, oh, we are learning the 1 by 1s in school when they meet timetables. So that's where the name came from. Now let's quickly look at the game. Let me see if yes, works perfect. All right, so let's start with the demo code. So on top here, you see 4 different tabs, and the last 2 tabs are more or less the plain vanilla demo. So this is what we were given by Very Good Ventures. So here, for example, this is the very, very basic. So just to remind you what a slider puzzle actually is, let me demonstrate. You shuffle it, and then you start to slide and slide the tiles back. Now, I'm not going to solve this puzzle live while talking to you, so let's not even attempt. But I mean, you get the idea, and you probably remember it. The second version of their game is a little more interesting. I'm not sure you can actually hear the sound, but there is cool sound effects. There's also a lot of animation. So let me start that. You get this countdown sequence, some clicking, some jizzling, and then again, you can start sliding. There should be sound as well, but it might not be audible. And then the other interesting thing is you can switch to different themes. Again, sound enabled. And yeah, lots of animations, lots of different concepts on this page alone. So let me go back to my slide. All right. When you look at the code, I did look at the code, and I found basically 6 different blocks defined in their code. And I added another 7 or actually 8, I think, to it. Now, don't memorize this list. That's not important, but let me show you where they are. So this is a screenshot. Oh, by the way, I forgot one very crucial thing. I quickly have to back up. Sorry for that slight oversight. I showed you their code, but of course I also need to show you mine. This is not the demo. Right. All right. So sorry for that. So I stopped here at the VGV code, but let's see what I made of it. I wrote a math puzzle, which is basically multiplication here and then the results, kind of the result in each tile. If you start this game, everything gets shuffled. And now you have to slide the things. It's, for example, the 30 goes here, this tile here goes up in the corner. So you need to slide it up there. Again, I'm not going to do that on live TV, but you get the point. You have different modes here. Like, for example, I personally think Roman numbers are a lot of fun. But since we are all geeks in this room, might also like binary, there is, you can choose various degrees of complexity. If you play this, you will very quickly find that it is devilishly hard. And you also probably catch on the general idea here on trying to trick little kids into practicing their multiplication tables. And I didn't want them to get too hung up on the actual sliding puzzle and think more about their math. So I secretly put in a second mode, which I call swap mode, which is exactly the same as the sliding. It's just that the mechanics are slightly different. So in this game, in this mode, once it started, you can jump from, you can kind of swap the tile from any position into the correct position. So here, for example, I'm swapping the 36 in there. This should be a 45. And this one, I would actually have a chance of solving while talking to you. Let's move on. I also have a leaderboard here and a local history and a few other features, including like translation. So let's go back to my slide and go back to this little detour. I already talked about that. And yes, this is where we stopped. I started showing you where my different blocks are. And I'm starting with basically their version, the initial version that they gave us. So what do we have? We have the audio control block, which is basically muting and unmuting. We have a timer block. This one is starting to tick once the game is started. We have a theme block where you can switch between the different games. Initially only 2 themes, later 4. The name is slightly unfortunate because they also use themes to describe the blue, green, and yellow theme here. So it probably would have been easier to call this one, I don't know, type block or mode block or something. But I mean, minor problem. A puzzle block, this one is the biggest of them all because this describes the puzzle state. It has functionality to generate a new puzzle. It remembers which tiles are where, how many are in the correct position, how many moves the user has done already. All of that is encapsulated in the puzzle block. A dash at a puzzle block deals with the startup sequence and the kind of whether the game has been started, finished, or is currently in this countdown modus. The boundary between the two, between puzzle block and dash at a puzzle block, was not always completely clear to me. So quite a few times I actually had to look at, had to search for a certain element of a state that I was looking for, figure out which block it belonged to. But I also, I mean, it makes sense the way they did. It is not completely trivial to second guess later. And then the last block they used was the dash tile theme block, and that's to switch between the different colors and different images. All right. In my own version, I built on that. I added the language control block that just toggles between German and English just for exercise sake. I have a settings block. And this one is interesting. It's fairly straightforward. I mean, how much different settings can you do? But every time a setting changes, lots of different components, lots of different widgets observe the setting. So when a setting changes, pretty much the entire page rebuilds. For example, there's a new leaderboard being fetched. There's a new local history being fetched. Of course, the puzzle itself gets reset. So, I mean, lots of things happen once you change the setting. Leader block. The leaderboard, by the way, is maintained in Firestore. And the history block, that's only my local history in chronological time, that's maintained in shared preferences. In a real production app, I would put both in Firestore, but here for kicks and giggles, I thought it would be cute to have like 2 different storage mechanisms and compare them. Then I have the login block. Because I was too afraid of South African POPI regulations and all the T's and C's and whatever you, I only support anonymous authentication. But because an anonymous ID is so boring to see in a leaderboard, I assign every new user at sign up a unique string so that you at least have some memorable string that you can recognize yourself with. So I've been playing for the last few days as check price. And then finally, there is the mslide and mswap puzzle blocks. The two are almost similar, almost identical. I initially envisioned the 2 puzzle modes to diverge significantly. In the end, they were almost the same. So if I do it again now, I would probably combine these 2 blocks. But this was a game with deadline. I didn't have time for that. So I wish I could walk you a little more through the code now, but you probably get more out of it if you look at it at your own time. I would, if you get serious about starting with the block pattern, I really encourage you to look at the VG Ventures code. And I would suggest you start with the audio control or the timer block. Both are fairly simple, simple states, simple events, clear transitions, and then you can see like various call sites where these blocks are called and observed. Once you've mastered that, look at the puzzle block, which is the most complex of them. And there you can see really the benefit of having your business logic not mingled with your UI changes and why that is such a cool thing. All right, I'm almost at the end. Few conclusions first on the technical side. I'm quite impressed with the block pattern in retrospect. I think it made it provided for really clear structure, made understanding and modifying somebody else's code extremely easy. And I think I would definitely. I mean, it's not the only state management technique, but it's definitely one that I will add to my repertoire. Sometimes I found defining the correct states or events. So when I made mistakes, when I found myself at a dead end and had to kind of undo the last few hours of work, it was typically because I got that wrong. I defined the wrong states or the wrong state transitions or put them in the wrong block, something like that. So I think that requires the most thought. And that's also for me the reason why reading tutorials alone is not enough, because tutorials are always so simplified that this kind of stuff, like really you have lots of states that depend on each other, lots of interaction you want to model. How do you do that you see most likely in a more complex example? One thing I noticed is that I'm very used to exploring new code with a debugger, so I really step through it with a debugger and kind of find my way around that way. And that works less well with the block pattern just because it depends on streams and asynchronicity. You have to be a bit careful about kind of catching your debuggable events again through a new breakpoint. But I mean, that's a minor complaint. You get used to it. It's just something I noticed that I had to adjust my habits a little. So overall, I'd say it's absolutely, it's quite a steep learning curve, more than with other state management techniques that I tried before. But it's worthwhile. But if you don't feel it's worthwhile, then do yourself a favor and also look at some real examples. Maybe you change your mind. Now, on the puzzle hack conclusions, I have to say, like, yay. It is lots and lots of fun. I really enjoyed it. I spent a tremendous amount of time on this. I got very ambitious after a while, but I feel that I did it mostly because I felt I was learning a lot. It was a completely new type of exercise for me, and I feel it improved my understanding of a lot of different things, not only the block pattern. And so I think I was getting a lot of benefit. If you decide to do a challenge like this, maybe don't do it to just win. I mean, the main prize is a laptop, and I would love to win. But I was one of about 5,500 registrants. So the chance that they pick my submission is like about this one. But it doesn't matter because I think I got everything out of it. I had a good time and enjoyed it, and that's all that matters. So last slide, references. I wish I could, I talked a lot about tutorials here, and I wish I could kind of recommend a good one to you, and I tried. There are so many out there that I had a hard time selecting. So pick one that suits you, that you feel comfortable with. Do pay a little bit of attention to the publishing date, because the block pattern went through quite an evolution and changed API. And so some of the really old tutorials might not work out of the box anymore. I mean, you can adjust it, but it's always nicer to kind of be able to copy and paste from the tutorial straight into your code without further thinking, at least in the beginning. And yeah, and then please check out the game and play around and see if you can beat my nephews. It was written for them, with them in mind. And so let's see if you can beat a 7-year-old. And yeah, that's it. And do we have questions?
Thank you for that interesting topic on block. From your experience with working with state management, how do you rate block compared to the other ones you worked with?
So the other state management system that I've used many times, aside from the plain, so I would always first look at a stateful widget. You know, often that gets you a long way, and you know, if it works, by all means, use it. I've used Riverpod extensively, and I also really like that. And I haven't quite made up my mind. I don't think I'll ever kind of switch to one over the other permanently. I think both Riverpod and Block have their reason to be, and I would probably at this point pick Block for more complex applications. Yeah, I think either one you can't go wrong. And I did think a lot about this over the last few weeks and read quite a bit of different articles. And basically, it seems, I don't know, it's a question like VI or Emacs. So people have strong opinions one way or another. The opinions aren't always terribly rational. I think at this point, I'm still on the fence about it. I will continue to use both techniques. But I do feel, at least so the last few weeks have changed my mind insofar that I do think Block is a serious contender now. Before I had dismissed Block outright and said, you know, it's just not worth it.
Okay, thank you. Alistair has a question for you. Since block might be complex, which use case are suited best for it?
I think it shines in a scenario where changed state transitions are non-trivial, and you observe that state all over the place. Like, for example, let me see if I can quickly go back to one thing. Let's see, what I want to get to is, well, this will do. This slide here, you see the puzzle state, and then here you see 0 moves, 15 tiles. And so there'll be different widgets in different branches of your widget tree. And they both kind of need the same information, like, you know, how many tiles have been solved, are in the correct position, how much is left, how much has already been done, are we done yet? And the block makes it very easy to define a complex state object and then observe it in different places. And from there on, don't stress anymore about whether you have to rebuild that, you know, whether the information has changed. It will change automatically when your state changes. So I think that's a scenario where block worked really well for me, where basically many different widgets depend on one piece of information.
Okay. Let me see if there are any other questions that have been raised in the chat. Maya asks, I wonder if the block pattern is closer to MVI or to MVVI, or is there no comparison?
I'm sure there is, and I throw that question back to the Flutter community. I normally don't pay that much attention to the theory of these architectures, so I'm not the best person to answer that question. But I'm sure people have an opinion on it, and I see there are quite a few Flutter developers. So please give your opinion to Maya in the chat.
Definitely. All right. Let me see if there's any questions maybe I've missed around. Oh, Ewald asks, are you gonna become a full-time game developer now?
Am I a Flutter what developer?
Are you going to
Flutter full-time
become
game developer.
yeah.
I feel I already am. I'm not doing it for clients. No, it seems like most of the apps I'm writing, because I typically want to demonstrate or try out some new technology, and I quite often pick some little game idea, but it's always a bit of a novelty idea. And a lot of my ideas come out of interactions with my family. So this game, for example, is literally, I visited my nephews over Christmas. I saw them struggling, or just not struggling, but whining. I said, "Oh, do we have to practice math again?" And I figured, oh, I can make that fun. And so that's how, I'm basically just learning Flutter and trying out things, but hey, that's just a good opportunity as any to write a little game from it.
Well, but it's been a very interesting game that you've made, and I do believe there's a use case for it for teaching and learning, which is one of the best things for the kids to learn some new skill, but also make it interesting for them to not get bored. Right. Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I'm going to get ready to bring on our next speaker. Let's see if she's ready. All right. Hi, Maureen. I think you're on mute.
Hi, George.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you? I'm doing
I'm
well. Very
fine.
good. Are you
Yeah, I'm
ready
good.
to take us through?
Yeah.
Awesome. Uh, Let me get your slides up and running. Uh, you can share your screen.
Yeah, I
All
have.
right. Okay. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to speak at your event. My name is Maureen Josephine, and I'm super glad to join the Cape Town community to share a few things that I know regarding Flutter Gherkin. So today I'm going to give a talk on BDD with Flutter Gherkin. Before then, let me introduce myself. Yeah, so as I've said, my name is Maureen Josephine. I'm a Google developer expert in Flutter and Dart, recognized as the first female Flutter GDE in Sub-Saharan Africa and the first female Flutter GDE in Kenya, which I find as a great honor. Aside from that, I'm a WTM ambassador. So by WTM, this is a program by Google called the Women Tech Makers program that unites all women in tech to share and contribute towards technology and thrive together through learning resources, empowering other women in tech, and giving like a helpful support to anyone who is just getting started. Aside from that, I'm a tech communities lover. I'm the founder of Flutter Kisumu, a community where we invite speakers to come and give talks revolving around Flutter, just like the GDG Cape Town. And besides that, I'm also part of other tech communities around locally in Nairobi. So mostly reuniting with other people within the tech community, and also sharing ideas, empowering others is what I love. So professionally, I'm a software engineer. I work as a mobile developer using Flutter as my major tech stack. And besides that, I also write backend applications using Java. Besides that, I'm also passionate about SQL and anything to do with database. So let's get into it. So this is my today's agenda. We are going to check what's BDD, the difference between BDD and TDD, which most people always confuse, the entire BDD process, how it actually works, and implementing how to implement BDD in Flutter. And in this case, we are going to use Flutter Gherkin package, which is going to help us do this BDD implementation. Then I'm going to show you like a short demo on how I've implemented this BDD in my Flutter application using Flutter Gherkin. And then lastly, if you have any question, you can feel free to shoot it. So what's BDD? BDD is precisely behavior-driven development, more on like how does the app behave maybe when you launch it, the first time that you open an app, how does it behave? Because a research has it that many people, like a certain number of percentage of people, own and have mobile phones, and within these mobile phones we have various applications. So BDD mostly aims at testing like how does like that specific application in your phone works. For example, when you open WhatsApp application, does it really open the way you expect it to do? If you send a message, does it really send it the way you expect it to do, or it doesn't send? What happens if you don't have like data connection or internet connection? What if the other person is not online? So behavior driven development, it's an agile software development process that involves collaboration between developers, the quality assurance testers, customer representatives, and the business as a whole, trying to make sure that everything works as expected. So there's something that people often confuse, that's the TDD and BDD. So what's really the difference between TDD and BDD? TDD is test-driven development, which I'm sure many people try to adopt into their applications. And as I've mentioned, BDD is behavior-driven development. So this is a highlight of the difference between BDD and TDD. So BDD is more on testing like certain scenarios, like when you open the app, does it launch as expected? Does it work as expected? However, from the TDD side, it's more on writing tests for the functional code. Let's say you are testing a feature of paying maybe for goods, and within your code, you are trying to write a test to validate that these goods are paid as expected. So when your test fails, you'll have to rewrite them so that it matches whatever expectation you expect from the whole output or the whole functionality. However, from the BDD side, it's trying to test like an end-to-end operation of an application, especially on scenarios. Is mostly based on scenarios, like when you open, if your app has like how do you call it, like a splash screen, does the splash screen show when you launch the app, or does the image pop up as it should? So that's like a simple difference between BDD and TDD. So what's exactly the BDD process that you can adopt in your application? So if you're wondering how does that process really work, do we really need BDD if we have already done TDD, like that's the test-driven development? Do we still need behavior-driven development? And the answer is yes, because in agile way of working. The three amigos, that's the business, development, and the testers, all work together to attain a certain goal. But how can a business, people from the business side understand whatever feature you're working on? So they also need to get like a clear cut on an end-to-end test of how the functionality of an application is working. And by this is where now the BDD process comes in. So as I've mentioned, in the picture, we can see like the customer and the domain expert. We also have the QA, which is the quality assurance tester, and the developer. So in case of a new feature, let's say it's still an application to do some payments. So the customer wants an application that should be doing some payments, allowing both like bulk payouts of payments or individual payments or just direct bank transfer. So that's the story that comes in. And so the customer and the domain expert, let's say the project manager or the product owner, discusses this requirement with the customer and tries to validate if that functionality they want in the application is going to work. And after that is when they come up with stories. And these stories will be like small tasks, small achievable tasks, trying to focus on the end goal of building this payment application. So if one story is that you'd like the application to enable someone to do payment via M-Pesa. So M-Pesa is a mobile money transfer service in Kenya. So let's say if a customer specifically wants that payment via M-Pesa mode. So that's like one story. There can be as well another story, maybe payment with card or direct bank transfer payment. So that's also a separate story. So after validating these requirements, so from the developer, after coming up with this story and analyzing it and narrow it down to whatever requirement that you'd love to be built. So the developer comes in action to take in that feature to be built, or rather the story, and works on the actual development. So after that is when now, after completing the development, so where BDD comes in is the developer tries to validate that indeed this application remits money as expected, like the money moves from account A to account B. So in BDD, you are going to try to validate that scenario, like does this mobile money transfer works as expected, and things like that. So this is an image of the entire process of the BDD process. As I've mentioned, the first process is mostly about discussing the feature or the requirement, and then we write the scenario. Let's say if you open the app or if you press the payment button, then money should move from one account to the next account. Then after validating that scenario, you write the code. If it still fails, you have to like refactor till it works. I mean, till you get the green button. And after that, the test scenario passes. And if it doesn't as well, you can refactor like the whole process. So the question is, if we have like this entire BDD process, what are you really required to do to make BDD like the behavior-driven development approach successful? So here comes in what like the terms that we use for the BDD development. So when writing these scenarios, we start with like a preset condition. So we have like the given term and the when and the then, where the given is when the preset condition, let's say when you launch your mobile application app, the payment application app. So given that when you launch that application, payment application app, so you ask yourself, what should happen? What should we expect when an event occurs? So in this case, let's say when we press the payment button within the payment application app, when you press like pay with M-Pesa or pay via card or pay via direct bank transfer. So what events are we going to expect? Then here comes the output. So the then is more on trying to tell you that when this action is done, let's say when the button is pressed, then we should expect like transfer of cash from one account to another. And by that, we also expect the account where the money came from to reduce, and the account where money is going to increase by with the specific amount that you sent. So this is the whole scenario of the preconditions that we need when writing the BDD tests. So how can we implement BDD in Flutter? And just to add on this, BDD can be implemented in other programming languages as well. So in Java, I've used the BDD approach as well, but I've used Karate to write this behavior-driven development test. However, in Flutter, I'm going to show you how to use Flutter Gherkin to implement the BDD process in a Flutter application to achieve the same thing that you can achieve when writing BDD tests in any other application, any other Java application, JavaScript application, or even Python application. So the Flutter Gherkin plugin, it's a Gherkin stroke cucumber parser, and it tries to test the runner for the Dart and Flutter application that you have. So what it does, it just passes whatever tests you've written within your application, and it's going to make it like it kinds of translate it to a readable form, such that when you run this application, it passes whatever tests you wrote, and you get like an output of what you are expecting. And something else to mention with BDD, it's more on like a language, like you just write it with wordings. You don't have to write like complex tests on what exactly you expect when you do something like TDD, since the BDD expects you to write like tests in form of scenarios, like when you launch this app, what should happen and things like that. So what do you really need to get started with the Flutter Gherkin? So these are the steps that we'll need to use when working with Flutter Gherkin. So first of all, when you navigate to this link, you'll get like whole the readme of how this package works and an example of how it actually works. So these are the steps that we'll need to do when implementing Flutter Gherkin in a Flutter application. So first things first that you need to do is to import the package, the Flutter Gherkin package. After that is when now you create the .feature file. So these feature files are where now you're going to write your test scenarios to validate like a behavior of an application, pressing the button or showing an image or anything. And then you are also required to write like steps definitions. So what are these step definitions? These are the steps that are going to guide like the various scenarios that you're trying to test. So for example, if you have like a complex app that has a home screen and other sections of the app. So within the home screen, you'd like to write a step that I'd love to see an image that's going to be shown on the home screen. That's one step definition. And within the home screen, you'd also like to test if the texts are being displayed correctly. So that can be another step definition. And all of these refer to the feature file that combines the scenario that you're trying to test in your application. And then after completing that is when now you run the test with the Gherkin runner file using this command. So I'm just going to show you how I've implemented this in my my demo application, Flutter, my Flutter demo application that implements this Gherkin package, Flutter Gherkin package in it. And as I've mentioned, since we are using this Flutter Gherkin package, it's always wise to check for the latest version. So the latest version right now is 2.00, and you have to place it within your pubspec.yaml file. So I'm going to show you how exactly to place it. And after that, you also need these dev dependencies. We need the Flutter driver. So one thing that I have to mention is when you create like your first Flutter application, the Flutter test comes in by default, so you will not be required to add it. But what you need to add is the Flutter driver to enable the Gherkin parser to pass whatever test scenarios that you have in your app. So let me just exit this and show you exactly the process on how to do this. So this is a sample application of my portfolio app. Yeah, so this application is it's basically giving information about me. I wrote it back in 2019, and I always love trying to test things that I learn in it. So it has like everything in it, and if I come across any new feature that I would love to test, which is not like a client application, I usually use my portfolio app. So today I'm going to show you how I implemented the Flutter Gherkin package in my portfolio app to test a scenario. So as you can see right now, the app shows like a screen of the homepage of what entirely talks about me. So on the first bit is my name, then my image, my title, then languages and skills, talks about the languages, programming languages and skills that I currently have, and then also shows a list of my applications. If you press, you can also see them there, and my languages and skills, as you can see, and my blogs, which are a list of compiled list of my articles that I've written for Flutter and for other programming languages. So with this Flutter Gherkin package, I was trying to test this home screen, trying to see if the behavior that I expect. So in this one, I wanted to use like the most simple of the behavior that anyone can expect. So for example, if I launch my portfolio app, what should I expect to see? So in this case, I expect to see my name, I expect to see my image, and all those texts inside it, as well as like those cards. If you narrow it down to the widgets, because Flutter, everything in Flutter is a widget, I can test the icons, the text buttons, and everything that we have in the entire screen. So for today, I am only testing like my image, if it's behaving, like if I launch the app, does it show as expected? So I'm going to test my image, and if the text widgets are being shown as expected. So the first step that you need to do, as I mentioned, is adding the Flutter Gherkin package in your pubspec.yaml file. Yeah, so I added it a bit long time ago. So here is it. And because YAML file is usually case sensitive, so you have to make sure that it's properly aligned. So this is the Flutter Gherkin package, which is of version 2.00. And as I also mentioned, we need the Flutter driver for this to run. So I added the Flutter driver within the dependencies. And after adding this, so the next step is now importing the package to where you want to use it. And as I have mentioned, what I'm trying to test is only my home screen. And so I'll have to create like a feature file, as I had mentioned. So writing this behavior-driven development requires the feature file and the steps definition. So first of all, I have like features folder, and under it there is the home.feature file. So under here I wrote like a simple test that so the procedure on how to write these features is on the first line you write the name of the feature. So in this case it's the home screen. I named it the home screen feature. So what am I expecting to see on the home screen feature, which is now the scenario? So the scenario is test the home screen feature, and as I had mentioned, in BDD approach we use the given, when, and then preconditions. So the given precondition is that when I open my portfolio app, which is here, so what should I expect? So after opening it, then after launching it, because when I open it, there's usually a splash screen which moves for a few seconds. Then it now navigates to the home screen. So the event is now when I launch it, what should I expect? So in this case, I'm only testing the asset image, which I have here, and the details text if they are being shown here. So that's the home feature. And to make this work, you need the steps definition, as I mentioned. So on the steps definition, this is more on the steps that I want to be shown, or rather the steps that I'm trying to test. So in this case, I wrote like sample 2 steps, that one for launching the home screen, and then another one after launching home screen. So what should I see next? And as you can see, the step definition generic, this is an inbuilt method from the Flutter Gherkin package. You'll get it when you're using it. So, and this launch home screen step is the name of the method. So what does it return? So this inbuilt method has like several return values that you can make it have. So if it's a when scenario, so in this case, this is that's why here it's written as when one, and I made it take like a string and the Flutter world, which is also an inbuilt class within the Flutter Gherkin package. And the string here is when I launch the app. So what should I expect? It's going to have like that asynchronous process trying to locate whatever the value key that we have. And in this case, the input is going to be like whatever the input that relates to the whatever context that you have. And since it's an asynchronous method and we're using Flutter driver, so we call this from the Flutter driver utils, and then we have like the dot tap method, which means that when you tap the app, so what should you expect more? So this is basically trying to test the launching of the home screen scenario, like behavior. And then another step is after launching the home screen, what should I see next? So here is now when we have like the then condition. It also has this step definition generic, which is an inbuilt method within the Flutter Gherkin package. And within it, I gave it a name after launch home screen step. You can name it in any other way, since it's a method that you're going to call from the feature file. So what are you going to test here? So this is like a condition that after pressing the app, what should we expect to see? So in this case, we're expecting to see the image and the text. That's why I gave it like this string that I should see this image asset and the details that are being shown, and everything else is asynchronous process, which calls on the Flutter driver utilities that when tapped, like what happens next. And that's not the end of it, since we also need other things to make this Flutter Gherkin run as expected. So on the within, as you can see on the test driver folder, I have like the app.dat file. So what it does is within app.dat file, it's where we're going to enable the Flutter driver extension. And this one, when you click on it, so what really happens is that it's going to handle like that test, Flutter driver test, so that it becomes possible to pass whatever tests you have in your feature files, and make it like make Flutter Gherkin pass it correctly. So this is the enable Flutter driver extension method, and after calling it is call the main function after it. So in this case, we are going to call the runup method, which we under the runup method, we are going to pass in the my app class, which in this case is like this my app is a class that's going to call the splash screen as its body, and this splash screen at the end of after it's successful, it's then calls the home screen. So that's where you have to place it, so that when you launch the app, like the flow of the app continues as expected from the very first step to the last. And after that, you also need to create this app underscore test.dat file. So what this file does is that it's going to be more of like trying to call these methods that we have in our steps definition. So in this case, it's a future, and it's going to call like the Flutter test configuration, which is also inbuilt. And what it does is like trying to provide a configuration, default configurations for the Flutter test. And as you can see, it calls in the .features file. So this is the path for this feature package. It's like 2 dots since it's a package. So, and this it's text. We give it like more of a regex expression, which is also built in within the Flutter Gherkin package. And also we have like the reporters. So these reporters, what they do is like they give a report of like the flow of the tests. If your tests fail or if the test passes, you can get a report of everything here. And then the step definitions, which you have the launch home screen, which was within the step definition. So this is the method that we created to cater for when I launch the app, what should I expect to see? And then next we have the after launch home screen, which should basically show the image. So after having all these in place, as I had mentioned, you build your application afresh. Let's say if you made the changes, like it's always wise to do like a Flutter clean to clean the previous builds, so that you can have like a clean build when trying to test this. And after that is now when you run the application. And as I mentioned, this is the method, sorry, this is the command that you'll have to use to run your Gherkin file. And it's pretty much interesting because when you're trying to build up on your project, you get like a preview of what you're trying to test. And the beauty of these BDD tests, anyone can write them, even the like people from the business side, since it's more of English language, and like trying to write a simple English on what scenario you expect. So after all this, you run it with this with this command, and you can see if whatever you are trying to test passes or it works as expected. So what I'm going to do is to share like a code snippet, like the whole repository of how I implemented this Flutter gherkin, and you try to play around with it, since I won't be able to run out this because it's gonna take long and we are running out of time. So I'll push all the changes that I have on my codes, and then give like a comments on what exactly you need to do and what you can add to make it like achievable. And as I've mentioned, it's more of writing scenarios on steps from step A to step B. What do you expect when you launch the app and things like that? So thank you so much for the invitation. And if you'd love to connect or reach out if you have any questions, let's connect on LinkedIn with the handle at Jakelo and at LinkedIn as Maureen Josephine Steele. So another thing that I wanted to mention is I always hear people debating, is it really necessary to do like BDD, yet you can simply write integration tests and forget about it, since integration tests are end to end. So my take is that I've done both, and I usually find it's easier to write BDD in place of integration, or you can write all of them, like both of them, since at the end of the day you are trying to test like an end-to-end functionality of an app, like the end-to-end behavior of an app. But I would really love to hear your take on, is BDD necessary if you already have integration tests in place? So thank you so much for the chance, and I'd love to know if we have any questions. So I'll give it back to you, George.
Thank you, Maureen. That was a very interesting talk. Definitely learned more about Flutter gherkin and something I want to try, but I'm not really in Flutter, but it's something I want to do in my side projects.
Yeah,
Let's
thank you.
see if there are any questions. Oh, we've got one.
Mhm.
This is from Sylvia. She asks, from one woman tech maker ambassador to another, what is the landscape in Kenya for female devs?
Ah, that's an interesting question. Actually, I hear company. Okay, I have a friend who is an Android developer lead at a certain company, but what he usually says is that I think women are trying to shy away from applying to these roles. So my friend is an Android developer lead at their company. So when they usually launch for these openings, you find that most of the time only males apply and female don't. And when they try to break that balance, it's difficult to get like somebody who is a good fit for the role. So what I can say is that, okay, we're still not there, but right now, whatever as we go by, whatever I'm trying to see is that more females are trying to get interested into tech, trying to take up like STEM roles in their capacity. And I feel like maybe in the next few years we'll be having more female developers in Kenya, like to increase the current number, to occupy these openings that sometimes companies try to uh, break the bias by employing like also women into the team, if in a male dominated team. So what I can say is that females are trying to get up there, though we are not there per se, but people are really trying to learn. In boot camps, I see many women trying to also get started with STEM courses. So I feel in the next few years, then we shall have like an improvement of that ratio.
I hope that answers your question, Sylvia. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so Ewald has a question for you. Do you get pushback from developers regarding BDD? How do you sell the idea to them?
Oh yeah, yeah. So this is interesting because in my former company, when a tech lead was trying to introduce BDD, people were like, "No, we shouldn't really do BDD since we already doing integration tests." And one thing that he really told us, like the benefits of BDD, is that the runtime. So when you write like a BDD test, since it's more of writing scenarios in the dot feature files, it's more of trying to write like a functional behavior of a functionality. So it's easier to know what exactly you would expect. And this is something that business analysts can also write. And I found it interesting because when we started using BDD in place, so we stopped using doing integration tests. We were only doing like test driven development, and now with the BDD. So when we stopped doing that, also the business analysts were writing this BDD test because they know what the requirement is, they know what exact story we should have in place. So you find that as a developer, sometimes you being given a requirement, do this, and sometimes you try to figure out what's this requirement exactly. At the end of the day, sometimes you can build something or miss a requirement from whatever story since it was not clear enough. And so for cases where we have like business analysts also trying to write this BDD test, it's easy to get like scenarios that they expect. And yeah, so the most difficult thing was trying to convince developers to transition from writing integration test to BDD. And after some times, we adjusted. So in a scenario where would have like backlashes on such decisions, you only plot in whatever advantage BDD has that not having BDD won't give you as a team. Other people usually complain that it's time taking, but at the end of the day, I usually feel that you have everything uh, checked and certified. Since sometimes if you have like a feature and you write like a slight different feature from the requirement, at the end of the day, the customer might not be happy since maybe a requirement was missed or a scenario was missed.
Fantastic. I hope, Ewald, that answers your question. Um, so let's see if there's any other question. Um, Actually, no. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Maureen. It's been lovely chatting to you and listening to what you've given us about Flutter. I hope to have you, and we hope to have you again to GDG Cape Town. And as a token of appreciation for your talk, we have a speaker gift from you from our sponsors, Speech Payment. We
Mm-hmm.
shall reach out to you and give you a speaker gift.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the invite. So, maybe from your YouTube, I'd love to know if there are people adopting BDD in Flutter at the moment. So, that's a homework question.
All right. Thank you. I'll follow up with our viewers. Thank you a lot. To the rest of our viewers watching, thank you for tuning in today and hope to see you in an in-person event next month. So look out for the details on our Twitter page at GDG Cape Town or at ZTech Slack or the GDG community group. Hope to see you then. Good night, good morning, wherever you're in the world. Cheers.